So today we're talking about the listing agreement, right?
Yes.
No,
You know,
listing agreement yesterday.
what's the class for today? I was told it was the residential.
Purchase agreement.
Yesterday it was a presentation, right? Listing presentation yesterday.
So today is the listing agreement.
Oh, okay, sorry.
This is different. Don't do that. He's heckling me. Stop it. It's okay. So I'm confused too. When Romy and I we were both thinking we were going to do this, but I was told to show up by the guy who makes the schedule that we print. Right? So I figured he must know. So today we're talking about the residential listing agreement. Yesterday was the listing presentation. Assuming that went well, this is what comes next.
Okay.
Isn't that right?
Yes.
Okay. See,
Yes.
there's a logical flow.
Yes.
So we're going to go through a bunch of handouts. The first one I wanted to start with is the one about zip forms, MLS Connect, RPR. And if you haven't done this, my example is for Matrix, which is MLS listings. The idea is similar in Bridge and in Barris and in all of the others. But you may have to ask how if you haven't already done this. And what you want to do for a listing is to, first of all, know your NRDS number. Now, for people in Bridge, I think that is your login to the MLS.
Oh, sorry.
Wow. But for us, it's not, right? So if you don't know your NRDS number, you need to find it. And if you don't know how to find your NRDS number, what you do is you go to Google and you type in, how do I find my NRDS number, right? You will not be the first one who's asked this question. And you're going to be directed to a website by the National Association of Realtors where you put in your last name and your license number, and it'll tell you your NRDS number. Right? You understand that? You're supposed to have it, I think, tattooed someplace visible on your body, but I think that's someplace in the bylaws. Not really sure about that, right? But anyhow, now that you know your NRDS number, the idea is that will allow you connecting to zip forms. And there's a place in zip forms as we're going along. I have some slides about how to find your NRDS number. MLS Connect, which is Matrix, wants us to put in our NRDS number. I think in Bridge it's already there. But the part that we want to go down to is if you've not activated RPR, RPR stands for the Realtors Property Resource, you want to do that. And again, you simply, there's links within your MLS to get there. And you make sure that it's activated. You need to know your MLS name and you need to know your BRE number. You select it. And then now that you've done that, so I'm assuming at this point that you have set up, that your MLS knows your NRDS number, right? I'm assuming that. That helps you with writing offers more than it does with listings. We want CAR, we want zip forms and your NRDS number to speak to each other. And this is for writing a listing, right? And I'm going to show you why in a few minutes. So if you haven't activated zip forms, you need to go to car.org, log in, activate zip forms. And then when you're creating an account, it wants to know your NRDS number. And then you can continue and activate zip forms and select templates. What I would like to do is to go live, partly live, and demonstrate why are we talking about this? All right. So let's say I've launched RPR. Right. Now the reason we're going through RPR because we're talking about a listing agreement. And so usually listing agreements, those properties are not in the MLS. Because if they were in the MLS, they wouldn't be talking to you and listening to your listing presentation. So we're talking about an off-market property that we're going to write the listing agreement for. Is everybody with me? Now, my purpose of talking about this is because I'm lazy. I'm time efficient. And I don't want to spend a lot of time typing things that I don't have to. So let's say that I found, what's a safe one to show you guys? Let's say that I found a listing someplace. So let's say I'm talking to this property. This is an off-market listing. And I've gone and met with them, and by the way, I would do this in advance, but I go and meet with them, I do my beautiful listing presentation, right? It's so good, they cry, right, at the end of my listing presentation, right? They say, we're ready to go, and so now I want them to sign the listing agreement. Now, I'm looking at the property in RPR. Notice that little box over here. It says Zip Forms Transactions. Now, if you connected RPR and the zip forms together, which you should do by your NRDS number, this should work. And so you click on it, and it pops up. It's now showing me my zip forms. And it asks me, do I want to start a new transaction, or do I want to go there and figure out where I want to put it? I would say start a new transaction. It wants me to ask, it's a listing, right? What kind? I click on OK. Click on OK.
Which side was it?
Which what?
Which side? I mean, is it RPR?
I took listing.
RPR?
RPR.
Okay.
So in RPR, when I'm looking at a property, there's a choice that says transfer it to zip forms from any property, off-market property. Now what it's going to transfer to zip forms is all of the data it has, APN number, address of the properties, names of the sellers, all that stuff that's in the county records will automatically be imported into zip forms. We don't have to type it in ourselves. Now, if you're writing an offer and it's an MLS property, you can import the MLS information directly in, but this is not an MLS property because it's not listed. That's why we're there talking to them in the first place. So we're going to click on Go to Zip Forms.
When did you go to transfer to zip forms?
In RPR, we find a house, right? We find a house. In RPR,
Yeah, I did find out.
we find a house. And then to about the middle, go back. So
Okay, zip form.
right here, it says Zip Forms Transactions.
Thank you.
All right, we're doing this to save us a little bit of time. Because you're going to want to be writing a listing agreement like every day. Isn't that right? All right, 2 or 3 a day. And you need to get your system down, all right? Can't waste time if you're doing 3 listings a day. Is that right? So that's why we're there. So now we've added it to zip forms, and this is what pops up, right? It puts in the name of the street number of the county, it puts in the APN number, it puts in the school district, like all that stuff has just been imported into the zip form templates for a listing, just imported right in, right? Cool, I'm lazy. That's really good. Isn't that good? Now, the next thing you ought to do, and I think my slides get into this, is if you have not done so, to create a template. So I'm going to click on templates, and notice I've created a template that is called Seller Century 21, and it's got my name, and I go up there, and I open it, and I go to open, and what it's going to do is oops, I did it wrong. How about that? Let me go back to the dashboard. So I'm going back to the dashboard. I'm going back to transactions. I'm going to open up the transaction. And over here on the right, notice there's a apply template button. Does everybody see that? So what I did is I first went to RPR. I identified the property. I imported it into zip forms. And now what I'm going to do, step 2, is I'm going to apply a template. So I click on apply template, and this is going to work for me because, well, I made some templates. So I'm going to click on Seller Century 21, and I'm going to click on apply, and then I'm going to show you what is in the template and how you too could create your own. Does that sound like fun? So what happens when I've created a template? Well, let's go to Documents, and I'm going to look at the cover sheet. Now, what this template has done is notice where it says property information. That was all imported directly from RPR. But what I've also done is under the listing broker, I've got it already filled out. The name of the company's BRE number, my name, my BRE number, right, the address, all that stuff is already filled out. So what I did is I created a seller template. And in the seller template, I opened up the cover sheet and I went to the listing broker side and I filled all of it out. That means I don't have to do that again. right? Every time a listing, I do not have to type in my name, my viewing number, the name of the company address, the phone. I don't have to do that, right? You don't have to live like that anymore, right? You can be free. So that, by the way, is most of the time that it takes to write a listing agreement, is putting in all that information, your information and the property information, right? After that, it's a breeze, right? It's a breeze. So, speaking of breeze, why don't we take a look at it? Now, I've given you a sample. And by the way, so my template for sellers has what's in it. It has a residential listing agreement. It has the seller instructions to exclude from the MLS. That's in my template. Because if I'm writing a listing, I want a listing contract, and I want the authorization to exclude. We'll talk about what that means. Also, there's the seller property questionnaire, seller's affidavits, and I may have gone, I do samples. I may have overdone this one. But let's look at the residential listing agreement. So if we were in the handouts I gave you, the beginning of it were the slides about hooking up RPR and all of that stuff. Right? Then there's a sample of the listing agreement. Now, I have found, this is not always true, but even if people are relatively techie, I end up doing this at their house with a piece of paper. Right? You understand? Because I'm there and I want them to sign. I have special paper. Special paper. Right? And what my special paper is, it's white, yellow, white, yellow, white, yellow, white, yellow. And what that means is when I run off the listing agreement, I print 2 pages of 1, 2 pages of 2, 2 pages of 3, and it's a NCR form. Right? You understand? When they write on it, it goes to the next page. So it solves the problem. How do I sign them up with a piece of paper and comply with the law that says I'm supposed to give them a copy at that time? How do I do that? Right? Well, unless I brought my portable printer with me, right? Scanner and printer. I used to do that. I used to have one. It was made by my brother at Scan. And, unless you do something like that, right? What do? Well, you go back and you scan it and you send them a copy. It's better, I think, to just give them a copy right there. By the way, for my listing appointment, I have taken all the forms necessary for this house, including the TDS, the seller property questionnaire, the statewide buyer and seller advisory, all of that stuff. And after I've done the merge with RPR, I print it all out in that special paper for them to sign. And I take it with me on the listing appointment. And I show it to them. It's all ready. Yes.
How much is your special paper?
Oh, it's not. Hopefully, you go on so many appointments, you have to buy it in bulk, right? At which point you could probably afford it. I don't know exactly what it costs. It's a little bit more. I get it in Kelly's paper down in San Jose, right? But on the internet, Amazon, you can buy it. It's called NCR paper, and you just make 2 copies. Anyhow, it allows you to get them to sign right then and there and give them a copy. Right, the problem with electronic signatures, I find, when having somebody sign a listing agreement, is that it gives them the option to say, great, yeah, send it to us. Yeah, email. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, we'll look at it later tonight. All right, sure, we're going to sign it later tonight. All right, goodbye. Go ahead, send it to me. We'll sign it later. Goodbye. Bye. All right. Right, does this sound good for you to leave? If they didn't discuss this yesterday, let me tell you, the goal is not to leave without them signing this form. Right? You understand? So if you have it right then and there, right, you can go through signing the form. So even if people say, I've gone on appointments or on the phone, they said, I ain't signing anything tonight. I just want you to know. I showed up, the guy said, just as long as you understand, I ain't signing anything tonight. Right, guess what happened? He signed the listing agreement that night. All right. And at a certain point, when I'm bringing it out, I keep it on the table so they can see it. I don't have to scare them. Right? He's pulling out the listing agreement. So it's there. And then what I would say to them when I started to discuss it, they would say, I'm not ready to sign anything. And I say, I understand you're not ready to sign anything. Why don't I just explain what it is? Right? You understand? Right? Do you understand? They're probably not going to sign a blank contract. This is my theory. Right? My theory is they won't sign a blank contract. That means we have to fill it out in order to get them to sign it. Right? So on that paper, I fill out everything that is standard. I leave off price, maybe starting date, ending date, commission. I could leave off some things. Sometimes I put in the commission and I give a discount, like drawing the line through 8.5. And anyhow, I'm just kidding. So here we are. It's time to go through the paperwork. The first one is called agency disclosure. Right? And what I always say to people, this is not a contract, this is not an obligation, this is just a disclosure agreement. It's an educational form. Right? There's three kinds of agents. There's the listing agent, that's me, that's us, we're on your side. Our job is to get you the highest price possible under the best terms. Then there's the agent that represents the buyer. They're not on your team. You understand? They're not on your side. Beware of the RE/MAX people. Don't talk to them. Don't talk to them, right? They're not on your side. Their job is to get the buyer the best price possible. And then a dual agent, that would be when we, and that means the royal we were to find a buyer for your home, then we would be representing both the buyer and the seller. You do want us to try to find a buyer for your home, don't you? Don't you? And they're going to say, yes, cool, right here, sign, press hard, there's 2 copies right here, right? And I hand them the pen and ask them to sign this. Right? Then the second page is the California Civil Code provisions discussing this. I tell people that this is something to read if they have insomnia, right? But otherwise, it's just required to be on the back of the form. Then there's the possible representation of more than one buyer or seller, but I tell the people that what this means is that maybe I or my company is going to list properties in this area in addition to yours. Right? It's possible. It's possible that I or somebody from my company might list a home right across the street. It might be a nicer house and it's on for a better price. And I just want you to understand, I don't have any control of that. Right? You understand? It's possible that we may be representing more than one seller in the neighborhood. You got that? You go, yeah, cool, sign here. Right? Then here's the wire fraud and electronic funds advisory. And yeah.
Go back to that other form. It's also possible that because we're such a large company, 450 agents, you might have a buyer in your same company that represents the buyer, right? So it's a dual agency in that case because it's going through brokerage.
That's why I meant the royal we. Yes.
Also, if there are 2 owners in that property, husband, wife, or maybe 2 partners, then you are still representing 2 sellers.
Yes, but that doesn't make us a dual agent. And we're only representing one property. That's not talking about those 2 sellers. It's talking about other properties in the neighborhood that are competing. You understand? Let's say I list the same model as yours right across the street and for $100,000 less.
And it's
how are you going to feel?
Sign. Yeah,
how are you going to feel about that? Because they're going to buy that one before they buy yours. You might be buying it. Wire fraud and electronic funds transfer. And that form, is this in the order?
No.
You mean, Melissa, wonder if did she print every other page?
It's not there.
What do you have?
Where
Could you ask, because this was just a sample, and the sample had all that stuff. Maybe not. All right, let's just go to how about this? I may have sent, I don't know, I may not have included. This is bonus material. How about that?
It's
and I believe in the back of it, there's copies of it.
Yeah, it's in the back.
It's in the back.
Yeah.
We're just trying, it's in the back.
Yeah, some of them.
It's in the back. But this isn't the important part. The important part's coming after this bit. And what the wire fraud and electronic funds transfer advisory is, you want to make sure that you get the money when the transaction closes and not somebody, in Yugoslavia or someplace like that. Right? And so there's some common sense things, and we'll talk more about that later. And then they sign that. Here's the listing agreement. We have finally arrived. Date prepared is the date you prepare it. That isn't necessarily the date that you present it. It isn't necessarily the date that the listing begins. Those are all 3 different dates. So if I were doing it, I could do it today and mark date prepared, but actually not do anything with the contract for 2, 3 days, weeks, it doesn't really matter. Generally, it's the same date, right? You know, it doesn't have to be. And then you put in, it imported the name of the person right from, you know, the county records. It's got our name because I put that in the cover sheet, right? And it has the beginning date. And so you click on that and it pops up. And what you want to do is begin today. Now they might say, well, the property's not ready to go on the market and it really looks bad and we've got a lot of work to do. Well, that's fine. There's a difference between when we begin marketing the property and when I begin representing you and working for you. There's a whole bunch of stuff. So in my listing presentation, I talk about pre-marketing stuff that has to be done before we put it on the market. So before I can do all that stuff, we have to have, the law says we have to have a written agreement. Right? You know, and here it is, right? So I can get started right away. But there will be another form where we'll talk about when do we put it on the market, right? So we're going to start today, right now. And then it ends, and you have to have a specific ending date. I always think that, how about 6 months? Now, does that seem like a long period of time?
No.
How about 180 days? Is that better? 24 weeks. How about that? 24 weeks. That's all I need. And I'll sell your house. So we want to make it for a long enough period of time that we're not going to have trouble. Now, they might say, well, why do you need 6 months? Are you going to plan to take 6 months? And you need to know what the average days on market is. I would guess it's probably close to 50 for all the active listings in your neighborhood. And what I tell people is, if you had a car and you're going to cross the desert, and let's say you were told that it was going to take up to 90 gallons of gas, you know, to get across the desert, would you leave with 90 gallons? Right? Would you just, you know, measure it right there? And then, no, because you might be off a little bit and might not make it. You'd probably have more gas than you need to get to the destination, right? We need more gas. You know what I'm saying? And our ability to make an investment in marketing a property is determined sometimes by the length of time that we're representing somebody. Because if somebody says, well, I only want you to have a 2-week listing, I ain't spending a lot of money marketing this listing because in 2 weeks I won't have it anymore. But if somebody makes a 6-month listing, then they've made a commitment to me, I can make a commitment to them, I'm going to be able to spend more money marketing your property because of that commitment. Right? 6 months. So the property, if it's a manufactured home, you check the box. If it's probate, conservatorship, guardianship, you check the box. Checking the box releases the hounds, and other addendums and things like that are necessary. Compensation to brokers. Now we're getting to the good stuff. And so usually you check the box and you put in 6%. Right? Oftentimes when I pre-print it, it has 6%. I'm not saying they're always 6%. But I'm just saying I'm starting with 6%. Right? The last several listings I've taken, all have been 6%. Yes?
Yeah, there was a time years ago, it was actually that the seller, the owner, had to write it themselves what percentage they wanted to give.
I don't remember that, but anyhow, 6%. Does that sound like that sounds like a fair amount. It could be something weird. And something weird is instead of 6%, you check the box and you write in a dollar amount. Right? And I actually, one of the agents that I worked with, he's listing a house, and the guy had a bunch of Harley-Davidson motorcycles, and the agent liked Harley-Davidson motorcycles, and part of the deal was the seller threw in a motorcycle to the agent, right, for selling his house. And so he wrote in where it said, and he wrote in used motorcycle, right? He wrote that in. Right, and I called the agent up and I asked him how he expected the split with the office to go on the motorcycle, right? You know, do we take turns writing it? You know, I don't know. And he said, no, I'll pay you guys. I just want the motorcycle. Cool, man, fine, sure, we'll go with that. So notice what it says here. This is beautiful language in paragraph 1. if during the listing period or any extension, broker, cooperating broker, seller, any other person. So this is how you've earned a commission if it says broker, that's 1, cooperating broker, that's 2, seller, that's 3, or for any other person, which pretty much includes like any other person, right? Procures a ready, willing, or able buyer who's offered to purchase the property at any price and terms is accepted by the seller, provided the buyer completes the transaction or is prevented from doing so by seller. Broker is entitled to compensation whether any escrow resulting from such offer closes during or after the expiration of a listing period or any extension. So it says if the seller pulls the plug on the transaction, they owe us a commission. Right? They can pull the plug. Right? Is a listing agreement an offer to sell real estate?
No.
Yes.
If I've listed my home, have I offered it for sale?
Yes.
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 Oh, change your own. So if I'm sitting in my office and
That's
Jeff,
a tricky
it's
question.
a tricky question. I'm sitting in my office and Jeff Bezos comes in and he says, I hear you have a listing on that property over there. And I say, yeah. And he says, can I see it? And I'm like, sure. And I show it to him and he reads it. And he says, wow, this looks good to me. He takes out his pen and he signs, I accept. Signs his name at the bottom of the listing agreement. His chauffeur's a notary, they stamp it, and they throw it at me, and they say, we'll be by tomorrow with the money. Right? And so I call the owner up and I say, I got great news. Bezos just bought that land of yours that I listed, and he says, what do you mean? Amazon, Apple just called me and they're offering millions more for it. Has the property been sold? Is a listing an offer to sell real estate? And the answer is no. Because if it were, it could be accepted. An offer legally is something that can be accepted. If you cannot accept it, it is not an offer. Is that right? You understand what I'm saying? Right? If it can't be accepted, it's not an offer, not in a legal sense, which is what we ought to be using when we're talking about like listing agreements and things like that. What is a listing? And the short answer is it's an agreement to pay a commission. Right? That's what it is. Do we really care if the owner sells or not, as long as he pays us the commission? Do we really care? Right? I'd let him off if he paid me the commission. Right? So a listing is not an agreement to sell real estate. Does the owner have to sell if the buyer makes a full price offer? The answer is no. Might he have to pay a commission? Well, that's a different argument. Probably not. Right? You understand? So that's all that the listing is an agreement to pay a commission. Right? It's nothing fancy. Then it says, and this next is what's called the broker protection period or the broker safety clause. Yes?
You said to pay the commission
Yeah.
within that time frame.
Whatever this says.
Yes.
To pay a commission.
Yes, to pay a commission within the time frame.
Right, within yeah. And you have to make the sale or, as we're coming to, or within a time frame afterwards.
Okay.
So you understand a listing, because it's an agreement to pay a commission, is not really a real estate contract. You can't record one. And the reason you can't record one is because it does not affect the title to or possession of property. What does it do? It obligates somebody to pay somebody else money if they perform a service. That's not even a real estate contract, that's just a personal services agreement. Right, you understand? It's just, that's all it is. So this is called the broker safety clause or the broker protection clause. I usually write in 30 days. In all the years I've been in real estate, I've been in real estate since I knew. And in all those years, I've never known of anybody to collect on this clause. But this is what, let's say I have a 90-day listing and it's day 89. Right? And there are these buyers and they seem interested and they're like, ooh, And I'm like, do you want to write an offer? Do you want to make an offer? And they're like, well, we're going to sleep on it for a night or two. But you understand my problem? They're going to come back in 2 days and my for sale sign will no longer be in the front of that property. And they might go and knock on the door and the owner answers the door and they say, hey, I don't know, we were here last week talking to our real estate agent, you had a sign for sale and it looked like you were selling your property, but it's gone. Do you still want to sell your property? And they might say, well, yeah, come on in, and then they sell the property to somebody I found without paying me a commission. So what this clause says is that if I give a written list to the seller of the people with whom I've been negotiating, and they buy the property within whatever number you write in, 30 days, 60 days, I don't know of anybody who's ever gotten any money from this, but you write in whatever you
So
feel
you
happy.
have to give a list of the
Written
people,
list, it says a written list
yeah, of the buyers who came in.
that you've negotiated with. Right?
Not other agents.
No, not
buyers.
other agents, because that's not, no, just the ones you've been negotiating with.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not, it doesn't happen very often. Paragraph 3 is one of the better paragraphs if you're a real estate agent. And it talks about when you would get a commission. Now remember, we've already covered 4 ways in which you could get a commission. If you sold it, another agent sold it, the seller sold it, or any other person. But notice what it also says here in paragraph 3. If, without broker's prior written consent, the property is, this is number 5, withdrawn from sale, number 6 is conveyed, number 7 is leased, number 8 is rented, number 9, otherwise transferred, number 10, or made unmarketable by a voluntary act of the seller during the listing period. Now what that says is, let's say the seller calls you up and says, look, I've decided not to sell my house. Take your sign there, I have decided. Now, sometimes they have decided not to sell their house. What I usually do, because this is what they say, you've been doing a fantastic job. We got no issues with you. But it just doesn't seem to be happening the way we wanted to, so we would like to cancel the listing, and we've decided not to sell the house. Right? So you cancel the listing, because you're being nice, and then they sell the house to somebody that they met, right, that came to your open house, who contacted them directly. Right? And you're unhappy. Right? You're unhappy. So what I always say to people when they say that is, sure, absolutely, I'm willing to cancel the listing agreement, and there will be a clause in it that says that if you sell your home within the next year, you're going to use me as your agent. Mm-hmm. Right? Now, when they say, well, no, I don't want to do that, I thought you just said I had been doing a wonderful job. Right? Isn't that what you just told me? And you had planned not to sell your house to anybody anyhow. Isn't that what you just told me? So what's the issue? So why do you care, right? Well, obviously, because they are planning to sell the house to somebody, and they're not planning on using you as the agent.
They're not planning on giving money to the agent.
Well, maybe another agent sometimes, right? Yes.
So should you not get that in contract at the beginning?
Already here.
So this
is what I would. So let's say they write a letter. They say, take down your sign, don't show it anymore. I would say, cool. All you have to do is send us a check for 6% of the listing price. What this says, if without broker's prior written consent, the property is withdrawn from sale, made unmarketable. Take down your sign, don't show it anymore. Right? You understand? Mm-hmm. This says they owe the whole thing. Mm-hmm. They owe 6%. Mm-hmm. Right? At this point, they're usually negotiating. Right? So does everybody understand? This is all about you getting paid a commission. If 4 groups of people sell it and that whole long list of things happen so that you can't sell it, technically they owe you a commission.
So this is included in the whole year.
It's already there. Yeah.
And they have signed.
They've signed it.
So now they forgot that they signed.
They didn't read it. Yeah.
So then now they still owe you even after a year.
Well, this is a difficult thing this is more for negotiation purposes.
Is this something you have to explain to them when you go to your listing?
That all depends upon the person.
Yeah.
That all depends upon the person. There are some people, and I say this to them. Oh, by the way, I should have. One of the things you need to be able to do with these forms is to do this upside down. Mm-hmm. Right? You need to read the form so many times you can do it upside down. Because let's say it's a husband and wife, you want them to sign, and you got pieces of paper. Where are you going to sit? Mm-hmm. Between them?
Yeah.
Next to one? Or across the table?
Yeah.
So do you understand? You need to be able to go through it upside down. Mm-hmm. Right? And so I asked them, Do you folks want me to go and like explain every line to you, or do you just want me to hit the highlights? What do you want? And sometimes they say, I want to hear every line. Cool, right? I can explain every line, right? Most of the time they say, well, just, the highlights, the important parts. Right, not all the legalese stuff, just the stuff where we write in, right? Okay, so, all right, cool, I can do that. In addition, seller agrees to pay broker. If you're writing something in there, you're probably doing something wrong, right? I'm just saying, right? Don't write something in there. Then it says D, seller has been advised of broker's policy regarding cooperation with the amount of cooperation offered to other brokers. Broker is authorized to cooperate with and compensate brokers participating through the multiple listing service by offering to MLS brokers out of the broker's compensation either a certain percentage or, let's say, a dollar amount, let's say 3%. Now, what this really means is, let's say the owner doesn't want to list it for 6%. The owner says, I want to do it for 5 or 4.5 or something like that. And you're thinking, well, maybe I could clip 2 for me, right? Let's say it's 4.5. 2.5 for them, and maybe 2 for me, right? Maybe 2 for them, and 3 for me. I'm thinking, right? I did a lot of work to get this listing, 2% maybe that's all I'm going to do. Well, what I've done when I fill this out is I've told the seller what percentage I intend to give to the agent who represents the buyer in the MLS. And sometimes they care, and sometimes they do not care. But sometimes they want to know that you're not shortchanging the other agent. This is the theory. I'm an agent, I got a buyer, pre-approved, ready to go. There's 12 homes for me to show in the neighborhood. I get paid 2.5% on 11 of them, and I get 2% on number 12. How about this? I get 3% on 4 or 5 of them. I get 2.5% on another group, because I'm not good at math while I'm standing, and the last one is only 2%. Which house do I show last?
The 2%.
Lower.
Probably the 2%. So do you understand? Some owners care.
And then I will make it look really bad.
Right. Some owners care, and they're going to want you to put in the number.
Yeah.
If you don't write in anything, then you're kind of sort of saying that you're not telling, right? You understand? You may have more flexibility, but I usually put something in, right?
Yeah.
I do know the feeling about wanting to move it over, yes.
Why don't you do like 50%?
50%? No, this isn't 50%.
Of 6%.
So 6% is the total. It's asking what.
Half of the total.
Yeah, so whatever you do, it doesn't have to be half.
Okay.
But I'm just saying, it's the most common arrangement. All right, is everybody cool on that? Usually you're writing in a percentage. If you're writing in other numbers, I don't know. I mean, I saw one of our agents has a listing on a mobile home, and it says $4,000 is the selling agent side. That's it. That's all it
I have
is.
a question. Well, let's say if a customer commit to the contract, the listing agreement, after they sign it, can they legally to come out of it? Let's say if they have another agent, maybe they sleep overnight, think about maybe tomorrow morning I have another appointment.
There's no right of cancellation built into this. But there's practical issues. If they don't want to sell it, do you really want to list it? Now, if they say with another agent, I don't. But if I've had people change their mind and say they don't want to sell it. That's one thing. But if they say I like this other agent better, I'm less inclined to do that.
I had a client that signed. I went to his house at 7 o'clock at night, and he came out like 12 o'clock. I got him signed it. He called me very early in the morning saying that he was regretted again, and he talked to some other agent. But I spoke with the other side of the agent saying, "Hey, I already got the listing." So the guy, he just
Yeah, well, there's issues sometimes.
The agent that they're going to talk are going to talk. They're going to say things to make you look bad,
I would.
Me
Sorry,
too.
never mind.
Me
So
too.
E, paragraph E, seller, it says that the seller assigns these numbers in escrow, right? They're agreeing to the distribution in escrow. And then seller represents the seller has not entered into a listing agreement with another broker regarding the property unless specified as follows. You know what that seems to imply? That you could be entered into a listing agreement with another broker at the time you're signing this. Is that what that implies? Can you do that, sign a listing agreement when you have a listing agreement? And the answer is yes. When would that happen? A soon to expire listing. Right? Their listing is up in 2 weeks. They hate their agent. They like you, right? Because you had shown up at the end of the listing period and said to them, I can't believe why a beautiful home like yours hasn't sold already. Right? You know, we've sold several that were nearly as nice as yours for a lot more money than you're asking, right? You know, some line like that. So they say, well, look at this guy, he's a dead duck, you know, it's not going anywhere. It'll be up next Friday. We want you to take over. Can you do that? The answer is yes. Right? You don't ask them to cancel the listing they have, but you first of all acknowledge that they're in a listing contract right now. And what it says is, if under that agreement the property sells, then your contract is void.
Yeah.
That's what it says. Right. So is it possible to list a listing that's about to expire, having it start when it expires? The answer is yes. It basically confronts that right here. Seller represents that seller warrants that seller has no obligation to pay compensation to any other broker regarding the property unless the property is transferred to any of the following individuals or entities. Remember that paragraph with the list of people? Remember where the agent gave a list of people that they've been negotiating with during the protection period clause? That's what that's referring to. If the property is sold to anyone listed during the above time, the seller is obligated to compensate another broker. Broker is not entitled to compensation under this agreement. This is saying is that if that agent who you don't like, who doesn't seem to be doing a good job, manages to sell it before Friday, then I don't get paid anything and my agreement is over with you. Right?
Okay, I have a question. What were you saying about seller represents that seller has no seller warrants that seller has no obligation to pay compensation to any other broker regarding the property unless the property is transferred to.
And then there's so transfer to, under that the broker protection period, the broker safety clause, it says if I give a written list to the seller of people I've been negotiating, and one of them buys the property even after my listing is expired, I get paid. That's what that's referring to.
So should I put that there?
Just don't write it in anything. It's already there. This is saying is that if it was already listed and that agent had provided a list of written people, that sort of thing, then those people are not your people.
All right. Okay.
There's nothing to be filled.
And which
just leave it there unless they've already listed it with somebody else, and then you fill in the first line. Next page is paragraph 4, items included and excluded. One of the reasons I like to have this form out on the table in its no carbon required, version is that while I'm chatting with the sellers, I ask questions like the chandelier out there, the Tiffany chandelier, are you planning on taking it with you or leaving it? They say, we're going to take that with us. And I say, okay, great, let me write that down. And I take out this page of the listing agreement and I start writing it. Right. Now, do you understand what I'm doing is I'm exposing them to me filling out the listing agreement. Right? Because remember, my premise was they probably won't sign it unless I filled it out. Right? I tried to get people to sign things that I would fill out later, but it's hard to sell them on that idea. They want you to fill it out first. Right? You understand? So while we're talking with them, why don't we write in the things that we know, like what the price they were looking for, and why don't we write that in on the form? And then I've had people say, well, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I'm just, writing down some of our notes. And he said, well, it looks like you're filling out the listing agreement. And I say, no, I'm just putting the information in its proper place. Right? You understand? This is where it belongs. This is right there. That's why I'm writing it there. Right. So, write in the chandelier. The reality, this doesn't really matter. Because the purchase contract dictates who gets what. Right? You understand? But we're doing this because it gives us something we could, chat about.
You do have a separate one to list out things that are going to be removed and things that are going to be
Right, but the
left.
purchase agreement is another,
It's
it
another
says,
one.
it says in the purchase agreement, paragraph 8,
Yes.
that the listing agreement does not control over who gets what,
What,
right?
okay.
That's, it says that right in the words. So we're doing it because it gives us something to chat about and write on the contract, but it could change later.
Then you can counter that and say, by the way, the chandelier is not included, blah, blah,
Well,
blah.
what I'm gonna tell them after we sign the form is they're gonna take that chandelier down and put it in a box and go to Home
Yeah.
Depot and get something and stick it up, because we don't want buyers to even see it.
Yeah.
Because if they see it, they might want it.
Want it.
Then we argue about it. If they
Yeah.
can't see it, then they won't want it.
Yeah.
Right? Leased or liened items. Is it good to have a solar power system on the roof?
Yeah.
Is there any problems with having solar power systems on the roof?
Okay.
Yes, there could be problems.
If it's
Like,
leased.
first of all, it could be a PACE loan, which is a pain. It has to be paid off before escrow is going to close. If they're leased, then the buyer has to qualify for the lease. Paragraph 8B of the purchase agreement talks about leased and liened items, and it says that one of the contingencies of the contract is the buyer has to be able to get the lease. And this may sound bizarre, but it's sometimes easier to qualify for a home loan than it is a solar lease.
Really?
Yeah, because you're talking about a personal property that's depreciating in value and they have different credit scores. And a lot of times when they read the lease, they don't like it because it has like an $8,000 buyout if you cancel. And then they Google search the name of the solar company and they find out that everybody hates them and is complaining a lot, right? You understand this is issues that you need to resolve. Yes.
Can it be paid at close of escrow?
The PACE loans are what are called a super priority loan, which means it has to be paid off before the lender funds. All right, the lender won't fund until that loan is paid off. That means somebody's got to have enough money to pay off the loan before the lender funds, which generally means not out of escrow. Right? So if you have an alarm system, propane tank, water softener, liened items, leased but not owned, liened but not owned. This is a good time to talk about it. If they have leased and liened items, you're going to need to get copies of all that stuff, right? Because it's going to be part of the disclosures. Right? They get a chance to read the solar lease. They're not going to like it. Right? Anybody who reads those generally doesn't like it. Multiple listing service. Broker is a participant subscriber too. So I'm just a MLS listings guy. I would have spelled it better. We got, I think, the first pick for the name, MLS listings, right? We got first pick. Yours could be Bridge, it could be SFAR, it's something else. Now, what this is asking is this MLS the MLS that is the primary MLS for where that property is located? So let's say I was listing a property in Berkeley, I would be checking that box to say MLS listings is not the primary MLS for that property.
Oh.
Right? Now, it actually doesn't really matter in Berkeley because Bridge and MLS listings, sleep together. They share all their data at night. I don't know if you knew that. Right? But if it's San Francisco, that doesn't happen. And if it's in Contra Costa County, it doesn't happen. Now, this is the issue. Let's say I listed a home in Walnut Creek. My MLS listings will allow me to put in the city of Walnut Creek. It'll take the listing, right? Now I can say to the owner, I listed your house on the MLS. Want to see a copy of the printout? Here it is. Doesn't look nice. Doesn't look beautiful. There it is. Your listing on the MLS. The problem is it's on our MLS. It's not on that MLS, right? You understand? And those of you that are in that county using Barris and you run a search, which is what most agents are doing, they're not going to find that listing because it's not in Barris. It's in a different MLS.
Well, you can just do a...
Reciprocal.
Yeah.
But that requires that you know that there's such a thing, fill out the form, and sometimes pay a small fee.
It's funny because one question I have about MLS, when I put a property in Hayward and I was gonna do a reciprocal for, the East Bay, it was automatically already taken.
East Bay and Hayward are bridge. It's automatically done. And MLS
Okay.
listings and Bay East bridge all synchronize their data.
So they will automatically do it.
They automatically do it, but SFAR doesn't, and neither does Barris.
Okay,
And let's say you list a home in Roseville.
yeah.
Why not? Why not? Right? We're not a member of MetroList. Now you can still do a reciprocal, but you see the point, right? You're supposed to tell the seller, this is my MLS or it's not my MLS. And if it's not my MLS, you should have an explanation as to how you're going to get it in that MLS. Right? Otherwise it won't be there, and the agents that are in that area that are running searches using their MLS will not see your listing.
Yeah,
Because you didn't put it in their MLS.
I like those listings because they don't get to sell, and then you
Right.
can come and.
And by the way, I show people, if you're representing buyers, how you can use programs that you have access to, depending on where you are, that will search all the MLSs at once.
Oh, okay.
Can anybody name, now in MLS listings, we have a Paragon search that searches the big 7 MLSs, but can anybody name a program that you have access to that will allow you to search all the MLSs in a given area? What?
Quattro.
How about RPR? The Realtor's Property Resource will allow you to do a property search for active listings, and it searches all the MLSs.
Everywhere, yeah.
Right? What you'll find is that if you run Barris, you get a number. If you run the 7 MLS search that MLS listings have, you get a higher number. How many active listings there are. You run RPR, you get an even higher number. Because these are people in outlying MLSs that have listed a home, and you might want to look at that just in case you have a buyer that's having trouble finding a property. Yes.
So,
It's very
if
good.
I understand what you just said, maybe I don't, that's why I'm asking. Can you put a listing out without other agents seeing it?
If you put a listing out without, that's called, not really, no.
Okay.
You can have it coming soon or that sort of thing, but the idea of putting it in the MLS is for other agents to see it.
Yes, but I think I'm missing something here that says that if you have, there's a private MLS or there's
So
an
there's
MLS that doesn't.
MetroList. MetroList is the name of the MLS that's for Sacramento and that valley.
Okay.
Right. It's not your MLS. It's not our MLS. It's a different MLS. If I live in Sacramento and I list a home in Oakland or Hercules, it's easier for me to put it into the program that I'm used to using. It's right there. Right. Now what that's doing is it's putting that listing in Contra Costa County or Alameda County in the MLS for Sacramento County.
Yeah.
Right. Now I could tell the owners, high five, I put it in the MLS. But I didn't put it into the MLS where all of the agents work that are likely to sell the property. That requires something called a reciprocal. Right. When you get one, I don't want to go into all, if you put it in an MLS, if the property is located in an MLS other than your MLS, you need to ask, will it go into that MLS and how do you get it into that MLS? That's called a reciprocal listing. Right. And there's 7 MLSs that you can do a reciprocal listing for. Now, the rest of this is an explanation as to why the MLS is good. One of the documents, my web page, my personal Zap page is michaeldevlin.com. michaeldevlin.com. I'll give you a business card if you have trouble remembering that. And in my blog, I posted some links to articles that you might find interesting. And one of the articles is it's from the California Association of Realtors Legal Department about submitting listings to the MLS. Right. Now, what this paragraph says is that if you're selling your house and it's not being put into the MLS, chances are the agent is ripping you off. And if you read the CAR legal Q&A, it essentially says that if you're an agent and you're not putting it in the MLS, there's a good chance you're ripping off the seller.
Yeah.
And could lose your license and be sued. And the reason is that the more exposure the property has, the more likely we are to find the buyer for whom the home fits best who's going to pay the most money. Right? And by keeping it out of where everybody will see it so I can double end it, right, you need to reread the agency disclosure section that talks about the duties of the listing agent, right? And the duties of the listing agent is to do the best job possible for the seller, not to not market the property so that you have a shot at double ending it, right? You understand? Right? You get caught doing that, you can lose your real estate license, because this is kind of a basic thing you're not supposed to do. Does everybody understand that? Supposing you have an investor who wants to buy an off-market property, don't sign a listing agreement. One of the other articles that I've shared is other commission agreements called a single-party compensation agreement, which allows you to get paid a commission without becoming somebody's agent. You understand the problem? If I list somebody's home, but I'm selling it to an investor I know, but not putting it on the MLS, that listing says my responsibility is to get the best price possible for the seller, which is not what my investor wants. My investor wants the best price possible for the investor.
How do we do that?
It's called a single party compensation agreement and a seller non-agency. I have a video on how to do this, right? Where I go through the different forms. And for a nominal fee, we'll talk.
What was your website again?
MichaelDevlin.com.
You have a card?
Yes, I do.
You said single party what?
Single party
Compensation agreement. You will see, I have a blog, MichaelDevlin.com. I'll pick up more business cards for those of you that are looking. But in my blog, I put in a list of the different commission agreements. I have a video where I go through how to fill it out and why you use it. But you understand, if you really are representing a buyer, don't sign a listing contract. Right? You understand, if you're working with a for sale by owner, and the for sale by owner is only paying you a selling side, right? You understand, they don't want to list it, but they're willing to pay you a selling side. Don't sign a listing agreement with them. Use the single party compensation agreement and a form called seller non-agency, because otherwise you're going to be the agent of the seller, and that's not really what you want to do, right? Because you're representing the buyer. Right? If it's an expired listing, many expired listings will work with you if you have a buyer, but they don't want you to list it. So if you find a buyer, don't sign a listing agreement, use a single party compensation agreement. It says you get 3% commission and that you're not representing the seller in the transaction as an agent.
Well, there's an agreement. There's still an agreement, even though you are not, you still have to.
Right, you still have to. California Civil Code says that any agreement to pay a real estate agent a commission has to be in writing, and it has to contain certain magic words in Helvetica 10-point bold-faced type. And the words are the rate of amount of commission is not set by law, but can be negotiated between the client and the broker. And so the single party compensation agreement has the magic words and creates a binding agreement to pay a commission without you getting into listing it. You understand why this is connected to the MLS? Because this is saying don't take an off-market listing. One of the articles I posted is from the CAR about pocket listings, which is what we call listings we don't put into the MLS, we put them in our pocket. And it basically says if you do stuff like that, the seller might sue you later for not doing the best job for them.
Even if they requested they don't want the property?
You need to get them to sign. It just needs to be really clear.
Yeah.
So you can do a non-MLS, but you should make it really clear, right? And then some people, they're celebrities, they don't want it to be in the MLS. Somebody's sick, they don't want it to be in the MLS. There's some legitimate reasons. But what they're worried about is the reason it's not on the MLS is because you don't want it in the MLS, right? You understand? That is not a good reason, right? If the seller really doesn't want it in the MLS, that's a good reason. If you don't, because you want to double end it, that's not a good reason, right? So, are we going to usually put the home in the MLS within 2 days of signing the listing agreement? Generally speaking, the answer is no. Now, the different MLSs have different rules. Typically, they say you have 48 hours from when you take a listing to put it in the MLS, but you don't want to because the place is a pigsty and the roof leaks and the painters are coming and everything's going to take a long time. So what you do is you check this box. And that launches another form, which is called the Seller Authorization to Exclude from the MLS. And what that form says is that we're not going to put it in the MLS right away. We're going to put it in 2 weeks or 30 days or something like that. Right? You just check that box, and you have a copy of that form, probably 2 copies of that form. And so the form pops up, right? And you fill out the form and you give them to sign it. By the way, in the order of which I get people to sign things, sometimes that form is near the top. Because one of the objections that people give to signing the listing agreement is, we're not going to put it on the market yet. We're not ready to put it on the market yet. So I start with this form then. I say, I understand we're not putting it on the market yet. When do you think it might be ready? Good, we'll give you a couple of extra weeks. If you're ready earlier, we can change this later. But you see, we're not putting it on the market right away. They sign that, cool. Now they're more likely to want to go through the listing agreement because they know we're not putting it on the market right away. What else? Feature opt-in, seller representation, broker's duties, you might want to read it. If you and they are smart, you're checking these boxes, which says that the seller's going to get a termite report, a property inspection, and I would throw in others. If there's a pool inspection, a chimney inspection. If they have a roof inspection, right? Why are we doing this? And the answer is, when we are in escrow, we want the transaction to close. Did everybody get that statement? When you're in escrow, you want it to close. Why would an escrow not close? There are 2 reasons. One is the buyer's financing falls apart, right? And there's stuff you can do with that. You can call when you get the offers and see if the loan agent actually knows the person. The other is arguing over repairs. So if we don't have the inspections and reports, then the buyer is going to get inspections and reports. So when the buyer finds stuff that the buyer didn't know about, they're going to want to renegotiate the price. And then the seller says, the deals, I'm sticking to my number. I understand you want to stick to your number. What I'm saying is, if we don't have those reports, it's going to be hard to stick to your number. Because they're going to make the legitimate argument, we didn't know there was $15,000 of Section 1 work when we wrote the offer in the first place. So if you get all the inspections and reports and you can give it to the buyer before they make the offer, then that's not even covered under the inspection contingency. The inspection contingency only covers things they discover during the escrow period. It does not cover things they already knew about when they made the offer in the first place. You understand why we want to get all of this together. This is part of the pre-marketing phase so that we can give it to the buyer before they make the offer so they can't back out.
Yep.
Right? What if they want to get their own reports? Well, that's fine. They can get their own reports, but we should start with something so we know. Right? What else? Agency relationship, that's possible dual agency with the buyer, confirmation, potentially security, keys, lockbox, dispute, entire agreement. There's one other thing I want to talk about. Security, insurance. All right. 9C.
You said 9C?
Just a second. Just a second. All right. All right. So let me ask you guys this question. You're the listing agent. Sign this agreement. You get an offer, $800,000. Another agent calls you up. And the other agent says, hey, do you got any offers? You say, yeah, I got one. First of all, can you say that? You got one?
Yes.
All right. And then the other agent says, how much is it? Could you?
Yeah.
Is it legal?
Yeah.
Allowed?
Hello.
Is it illegal, unethical, and immoral to tell people
Only
what the
if
other
the
offers
seller-
are? But
Only if the seller okays.
all right, so you'd have to get the seller to write something special? Look at this paragraph, 7A. Broker agrees to exercise reasonable effort, due diligence, blah, 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 blah. Look at the last line. And disclose to any real estate licensee making an inquiry the receipt of any offers on the property and the offering price of such offers. Black and white. Says you can't. Says you're authorized. Whether you choose to do that is a tactic, frankly, I tend to tell people. If I think that the offer is good, if I've got an offer for $800, do I really want one for $750? So I listed this house in East Palo Alto for $999,888, and I promised the seller he'd get 1.2. Right? So offer number one is 1.145. Right? The guy gave us 3 days to think about it. An agent calls me. Do you have any offers? Yes. Well, you're willing to share how much? 1,141,000. He said, all right. He came back with 1 point. He went from 45 to 65. So another agent calls me. That guy gave me 3 days. I said, you got any offers? I said, yeah, I got 2. He said, well, you can tell me the price. I said, the highest one is 1,165,000. He came in at 1,175,000. By the time this was all over, the first buyer ended up buying it for $1,220,000. The first buyer, the one that started at 1,145, eventually bought it for 1,222, and I do not believe that would have happened had I not played the different agents against each other and worked them up.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Let's say when you have the first offer come in, technically you have 3 days, right? So by the 4th day, people call you and
that offer dies in 3 days. That's paragraph 31. So if it's a multiple offer situation, don't give the seller 3 days to think about it. Right? They don't need 3 minutes. Right? You tell them the price, they're going to say yes or no. Right? Now they're saying they don't need 30 minutes, they don't need 3 hours. If you paragraph 31, if you don't do anything, it gives them 3 days. And then agents that are doing this keep bidding it up and bidding it up and bidding it up.
My question is, the offer that presented to you is already expired, but does that still consider one of your offers?
No, you could say, yeah, I got an offer, but it expired. I've said that. Yeah, we got an offer for 1.5. We didn't even bother to respond. See, isn't it my job to get the seller the highest price?
Yes.
Isn't it? And might that tactic of letting them know where we're at and what you got to beat, is that possible that that's going to edge the price up some? Right? I'm just saying, I'm not saying it's, I'm just saying.
So just to recap, you're saying that in the contract, we are allowed to say to buyer's agent, because every time, with multiple offers, when I talk to realtors, they're playing this game of cat and mouse.
Right.
And I'm like, come on.
Right. But you can't lecture them and getting real estate agents to change their habits is difficult, trust me.
Yeah.
Right. But that language is explicit. And I've had agents say, when did they add that? There's videos of me that are 10 years old going through the listing agreement and I'm talking about it. It was in a different paragraph. It was organized differently, but it's been there as long as I can remember. Right. It's not a new thing. They didn't just add it. Right, it's just been there. Most people have never read, and by people I mean real estate agents. Most real estate agents have never carefully read the listing agreement. I'm just saying. Yeah.
Yeah, let's say the seller specifically instruct you not to say anything, not to say anything.
Then don't. Then cross it out or type it in. There's many places where you can type in poetry. Prose. You can type in, you can write a little poem and stick it in there. There's lots of space for that. Generally, this isn't something that comes up. All right. But I just wanted to cover what it says. Yes.
So you actually cannot, if I'm hearing you correctly, not give the price of that.
Disclose to any real estate licensee making an inquiry for receipt of any offers on the property and the offering price of such offers. It explicitly says you can tell.
So is it for only the agents, or if you just a nobody walking
This
around?
is with the listing agent.
Okay.
This is the listing agent.
Okay.
Did you have
Yeah, some agents also have these websites where they actually very transparent and they say, here, you submit your offer here, you can see the other offers.
Yeah.
Oh.
So but anyhow, I just wanted to clarify a common misconception, which is I'm not allowed to do it, it's illegal, it's immoral, it's unethical, I'll go to jail if I tell anybody how many offers I got and what the highest price is. That's not true.
Okay.
Right, you have to worry about, if you learn real estate out on the street, right, you understand? You learn real estate from other agents out on the street. Sometimes you learn things that aren't true, right? I'm just saying, right? They should know security. I have a seller checklist that that I go through after I list a house. So the goal, I don't go through everything right now. The goal is get them to sign a piece of paper and get out of there. Right, you understand? The goal is get them, once they sign, get out of there. Go. Right, don't keep talking. You might say something they don't like. Right, you understand? Once they've signed it, get out of there, set an appointment to come back. Leave them the seller property questionnaire and the transfer disclosure statement. All of the other stuff is just boilerplate stuff that they can sign electronically. They don't even have to think or read the other stuff. It's all disclosures being made to a buyer. The only ones they really have to think and read are the seller property questionnaire and the transfer disclosure statement. So you leave that with them. Give them homework. Now, some high driver types will say, I want to do it right now. I would do it right now. Right? But most people, you tell them there's a lot of questions. Why don't you take it, look it over, make a list of questions you got. I'll come by tomorrow. We'll meet and pick it up and go over some other things. Get out of there with your contract. Right, once you do it. You should, but security is one of the things I would go over with them. Right? People are going to be coming in and out. You know, leaving their gold, bars out on the table and, gold coins and, that sort of thing. They might want to think about putting the Monet in the bedroom away in storage or something like that. They should know that it's going to go on the internet and there's going to be photographs of the property. And we're going to put the address. And that's just the way it is now. I've had people say, they asked us, after the buyer bought the house, they wanted us to take the pictures of the house that they bought off the internet. The whole internet. Right? To delete something from the internet. I'm not sure how to do that. Right? You understand? For the whole thing. I think it's on Zillow already. And Trulia, and a few hundred, it's already gone. Yes?
That specific request I was made just last month.
Yeah.
And I said the same thing, but what we were able to do was to take out from the MLS, all except one picture.
Yeah, but it's still, it doesn't do anything with Zillow and Trulia and everybody else, which is where everybody's going anyhow. Right? And by the way, our PR will pull in the pictures even if you take it off the MLS. All right, because our PR will pull them off of Realtor.com. You still have the old MLS. All right, so they need to know. Now, again, if they just say, look, I just hit the points that I need to know. I don't want you to go over the whole thing. You don't go over it, but you ought to read this contract aloud enough times that you get bored doing it and you think that you could say most of the words, right? You should learn where stuff is. A lockbox on the property. If they say, no, we want you, make an appointment and with us and, that's how we want to handle it. One of the things that I would say to them is that you're just giving up a whole lot of money. All right, you're giving up a lot of money. And if I'm a busy, productive, successful real estate agent and there are 10 homes for sale and I'm looking at showing instructions, which ones do I show first? Are the ones that say go direct, vacant, just come.
Vacant, go direct.
Go direct. I do those first. Which ones do I do second? The ones that say call first, then go and show it.
Pain in the neck.
Right. Then when they start saying call the listing agent to make tenant is in the property, call the listing agent to make right. Yeah. Right. We show those last.
Yeah.
So only if the buyers have bought all the other ones first do we even get to start showing those. This is costing you money. Right? And then you need to explain, does the lockbox work at 2 in the morning?
No.
No. Do you know what the hours are? They may vary a little.
Like 8 a.m., 9 p.m.
It's like 8 to 9 or 9 to 10 or something like that.
You can set it up yourself.
And you can set it yourself. Very good. So you could set it so it doesn't work before 10 in the morning, it doesn't work after 6 at night.
Yeah.
Right? So that's what they're wondering. What if somebody comes in at 2 in the morning, some crazed, drunken real estate agent trying to show the property, what do we do? They can't do that, right? You understand? There can be controls. right? The other thing is that you know who's been showing the property. You don't want to make appointments, right? You understand? You need to convince them that they're giving up a lot of money by making, the more roadblocks we put in front of people buying your house.
Yeah.
Want to hear, I have time for this. My explanation to a seller as to what we're doing with this whole thing. All right, this is my explanation. I say to the seller, if you were going to go to a store and buy a dress or a suit, a new dress or a new suit, and you found one that was exactly the right color, the right style, and the right fit, would you be willing to pay more to own that dress or that suit than you would be willing to pay for one that doesn't fit so good? Right? Would you pay more for the one that fits good versus the one that doesn't? The answer is, well, of course I would. So you see, that's what our job is as a real estate agent. Our job is to find the buyer for whom your home fits. And that buyer will pay more money than just any other buyer. It may be possible that it would sell no matter what we did. But the question is, if we don't try to get the buyer for whom the home fits best, do you really know that you got the best price you could? So what that means is, how do we get the buyer for whom your home fits best? We have to expose your property to the greatest number of potentially qualified buyers. The more roadblocks we put up between us and the buyers, the fewer buyers that get to see the property, the harder we make it for them to see the property. Do you understand? We're excluding parts of the buyer pool as a result, which means we may be missing the one for whom your home fits best, who would be willing to pay more than anyone else. We're missing that person.
So what if they tell, well, why don't you, show the property to all these agents and buyers and blah, blah, blah?
Well, first of all, they don't want me there because this is what I want. Right, this isn't about defending your property, it's about getting you the highest price possible, wouldn't you agree? So this is the problem. Let's say you are there with your buyers and you're an agent and I'm the agent or the seller is there and your buyers think the carpet is really bad.
Yeah.
Now they may not say anything because I'm there
Yeah.
as a representative of the seller. However, if I weren't there and they said, well, that carpet really is bad, you could say, well, what kind of, do you want carpet? Do you want tile? If it were yours, what would you do with it? And they say, well, we would probably put in porcelain tile. Well, what kind? Right now they're talking about how they're going to fix the house.
Yeah.
Right? You could have that conversation, but not if I'm there.
Yeah.
So I tell the seller, we don't want you there, and they don't want me there because we want that agent to be able to freely discuss what's going on with their clients, which they will not do if we're there.
Yeah.
Right? And we want them to do it. So, lockbox, it's better to have one. It's better to make it as easy to show as possible. I've had people that live there that said, put it down and go direct. Will they ring the doorbell first? If so, I don't care. Just tell them, because they bought it when I said it. I want everybody to see my house. Put it down and go direct. You know you live here. I don't care. If I'm in the shower, I'll just tell them to come. I don't care.
Just long ago.
Now, if you have poetry that you want to write, right? Generally speaking, it's not a good idea to write extra stuff in. If it's an REO, what does that stand for? That was an old rock group. Real estate owned, that means bank owned property. Short sale, that's something at Kohl's. Kohl's? Macy's? Short sale?
No.
Short sale, well, you click the box, a whole other world pops open. A trust advisory, and that's if it is in fact a vested trust, right? If it's just a living trust, that's not a real trust in terms of the conveyance. But if it's a vested trust and somebody died, there's different rules, right? But not for a family trust. Everybody's saying there's more than one trust. I don't go through mediation, arbitration, ownership, and
so with living trust, you don't need to have a trust advisory, right? Because
I usually throw it in anyhow, but it's not the trust that's exempt.
Yeah.
Right. Really, what we're looking at, the problem are the exempt properties.
Yeah.
And the living trust is not an exempt property, even though it's a trust.
Because the sellers are still
right.
alive.
So let's say it is a living trust. It's an inter vivos trust, which means it's Latin for while living, like vivo vivacious. If it's a trust, like a family trust, you check the box
Okay.
that says representative capacity.
Oh, okay.
And then it launches another form
Yeah.
that says this is a trust and I'm the trustee.
And then you put the seller's names and all that stuff. Okay.
At this point with the listing, it's not the biggest deal in the world because the person is signing it, but you should have, if it's a trust, it marks as a trust.
Yeah.
Then there's the seller advisory. Is it okay for you to just go all the way through to 1 o'clock? We're almost there.
Yeah.
All right, thanks. We'll take a break at the end.
No complaint.
I believe this is a good thing to go through with people. I don't read it to them, but one of the things I want to make sure they understand is the section about general disclosure duties and statutory duties. And what the general disclosure duty is, essentially, if there's anything wrong with the property, they have to tell the buyer. Now, if the seller says to me, well, there's dogs that bark every once in a while, it's not very often, should I mention that to the buyer? What would be the answer?
Yes.
Yes. Well, I have a neighbor, and when the neighbor washes his car, he sprays my car with his hose.
Yes.
And yes. There's loud birds every morning that wake me up. And, yeah. Do you understand? Pretty much anything they ask you, what about? The answer is going to be yes. Right? Do you understand? If it's worthwhile for them to bring it up, it's probably a material fact is any fact that affects the value or marketability of the property. Barking dogs, so I actually sometimes tell people that, right? If you ask me, what about this? What about that? What about the neighbor that isn't fully dressed all the time? What about any of those things that you bring up? We need to put down.
And you can say just disgruntled neighbors or barking dogs. You don't have to explain that the neighbor comes out naked or something like that.
Right. You show them your video though.
Oh.
Yeah.
Really? Are you serious?
I'm rarely serious. So this talks about a bunch of statutory disclosures, and this explains why they're going to be robo-signing this big stack of documents. Mm-hmm. Right? They're going to sign the statewide buyer and seller advisory, the market conditions advisory, the trust. They're going to sign a whole bunch of stuff. I usually just do that electronically because they don't even want to read it. If they want to, they can, but most of it is about for the buyer. The NTDS, death and other disclosures. Somebody died in the property within the last, how many years?
3
years. You have a duty to disclose it. It's an affirmative duty. It's a question in the SPQ and TDS. Has anybody died in the property in the last 3 years?
And now you don't have to disclose, if they died like 4 years ago, you don't have to disclose that.
You do not have to disclose it if it's more than 3 years, but you cannot lie if asked.
Yeah.
So if the buyer asks, has anybody to your knowledge died in the property in the past, and yes, 7 years ago, you have to answer it truthfully. But you don't have an affirmative duty to bring it up. Unless it's in the last 3 years.
Okay.
Let's say if the property had been homicide before, and after the new buyer purchased it, that's after 3 years, but they find out through their neighbor someone got killed inside the property.
It's the law says 3 years, right? But I wouldn't want to. It's generally, let's say it was a really gruesome murder, I would want people to know because they could sue you, right? And that's sort of the problem.
Or suicide.
Yeah. Well, but right, the law says 3 years. I had somebody die in my listing while it was listed. Right. This, by the way, wins many bets at bars with real estate agents. In the listing, somebody died.
Wow.
And so he was a tenant renting a room, and so I got a call from an agent that said they couldn't show the property because it was locked from the inside, but this truck was there. And I went by and it's locked from the inside, rang the bell, nothing happened. Then I get a call from some guy's work saying our guy hasn't shown up, and we went to his house and we saw his truck there and he doesn't answer his cell phone, and we rang the bell and he didn't answer, and we saw your name, and so we called you. And at this point I kind of figured out, so you call the police, right, because somebody has to break the door, and there's likely a dead body in the house. I don't know what you're thinking, but I'm thinking I probably should call the police, to break the door and find the dead body. And then I got to meet the widow and the children that night at the house for them to come and pick up the belongings. Right? So I'm showing the house to this guy who had just gotten out of the Air Force, gotten married. He was up here, and I pointed, I said, and somebody died in that room like a week ago. I'm talking, I mean, we're not talking about 3 years. Like last week, somebody died in the room, and he went, right, you know, and then he and his wife bought the house, right? And then a year later, he's being transferred. So he calls me up and he says, you know, come on over, and I'm listing the house again, right, you know. And I say, well, you know, we're going to have to disclose about, you know, the death in the house. And the wife says, what death in the house? Right. He didn't tell her. He didn't tell her. Right? Yes. And so she looks at him, what death in the house? He's not talking.
She wasn't
Right?
there?
She wasn't there that day, and she just signed. He just said, sign here, dear, sign here, sign here, here.
But it was disclosed on
It was
paper.
disclosed, it was there, but he just said,
She
sign.
didn't read
It was
it.
him. Oh, she knew who was the, she
No.
knew. She knew, right? And then
Wasn't
she
you.
said, what room was it? and he's still not, you know, he's looking at his shoes, right, you know, at this point. And I said the first bedroom on the left, the nursery, you know, and I'm like, yeah, and we're gonna have to disclose it. Sold it again. But I'm just saying that if it's certainly, I did a lot of probates, and of course everybody assumes somebody died in the house. Right, at least they want to ask. But this is something, you know, I'm just saying you need to understand what your obligations are. Government required retrofits, EPA, pre-marketing. Notice they underline this section in pre-marketing conditions, considerations. Seller advisory, page 2. Look what they underlined. Many people are not aware of the defects or problems with their own property. One way to make sure you're aware is to obtain professional inspections prior to sale. By the way, do you realize that the transfer disclosure statement says that it can incorporate the disclosures, inspections, and reports that were obtained on the property? So one of the things I tell the owner is, if you get a termite in a property, and a roof, and a chimney, and all those inspections,
It's part of the disclosure.
it's all part, even if you miss something, right, they probably won't miss it. And it'll be on the list, it'll be disclosed, and you're not going to get sued. Right? I'm good. I had clients that it was a 5-year-old home, they never lit a fireplace. Never lit the fireplace.
Yeah.
Not once, ever. They had like a little candle thing that they never even lit the candles. Right? You know, they were in the fireplace. And I told them you need to get a chimney inspection. And they're like, you know, why? It's 5 years old.
Because you
And
have cobwebs and spider webs, and they don't burn off.
we got a chimney inspection, and there was a structural defect in the chimney.
Oh,
it was
yes.
built with a structural defect, covered still by the builder's warranties. But the point is, wouldn't it be better to know that there was $3,500 of chimney work before we put it on the market, rather than arguing about it in the middle of escrow if the buyer goes and gets a chimney inspection? Yeah.
Yeah, so the sellers, you know, when they make their disclosures, they're doing it to the best of their knowledge, right? And you go through the whole process to sell the house, to close those escrow, the new buyers come in, they start doing work on the property, and they find something that they thought the seller should have known. You know, what do you do at that point? Question.
Tell them to sue the seller. Go to a small claims court. The seller's gone. It's so much better to get the inspections and reports. And by the way, if you double-end it, which is not the worst thing in the world, what causes trouble with representing the buyer and the seller is the failure to disclose the material fact. I've paid for inspections sometimes when I was double-ending it because the buyer didn't care. I went and got them anyhow. Showed it to them. I had them initial next to stuff. Right, that they saw it. Did you see that? Initial here, right? Because that's what causes most of the problems with real estate salespeople and clients is a material fact that wasn't disclosed. Yes?
Isn't it all the California contracts, they're all like a sell as is contract?
Doesn't matter.
Well, what does as is mean? And the short answer is that there are no seller warranties in the contract. It used to be the CAR contract, and still the default setting on the PRDS contract, which is used in the peninsula, are seller warranties contracts. And the old CAR seller warranties were the seller warranted and would agree to provide to the buyer. One was a Section 1 termite clearance. Two would be a 1-year leak-free warranty from a licensed roofing contractor. All plumbing leaks, broken and cracked glass, broken seals and dual pane windows, any debris, any electrical problems. It said a list of things the seller warranted were good. Right now, that doesn't exist anymore. So as is means the seller is not obligated to fix anything. Right? FHA and VA, those aren't as is because they have rules about that. Right? Some things have to be fixed. Now, the fact that the seller isn't obligated to fix stuff does not mean that the seller doesn't have to tell the buyer what's wrong. Right? You understand? That's a totally different thing. And one could argue that if the seller wasn't fixing anything, the seller has a greater duty to tell the buyer what's wrong because the seller isn't warranting anything.
Yeah.
Right? You understand? As is has nothing to do with disclosure of material facts.
Yeah.
It has to do with the obligation of the seller to make repairs once you've discovered material facts. Right? Seller instruction to exclude from the MLS. A form you're going to use most of the time. Check the listing agreement, the date of your listing agreement. It's already done all this. Mandatory submission. Now, some MLSs say 72 hours. The model is 48 hours. Why not? But it says 2 days, or you could type in 72 hours. Just leave it alone. Now, what this is pointing out that you're required as a member of the union, the Association of Realtors, right? You're required to, within 2 days, either put it into the MLS or put in what's called an exclusion to the MLS, right? You have 2 days to do this. So depending on the MLS, some of them, our MLS, we log into the website and we just pick exclusion and put it in. Some of them want to see a copy of the form. Our MLS doesn't care about the form. If something went wrong, they might ask to see the form, but they don't really care, as long as you do it on the computer. Exposure, this again reiterates what that page 2 of the listing agreement said, which is you got to put it in the MLS, you got to put it in the MLS, don't let the agent not put it in the MLS. I'm summarizing, right? And that's what these 3, 4, and 5, and 6 say. And then, usually you've already explained it, this is to keep agents from listing the home, not putting it in the MLS, so they can double end it. So then you're asked, do not submit the property for a period of, that's the one we typically do, 2 weeks, 30 days, something, right in, so many days. And you tell them if they need more time, we can extend it. If you're ready earlier, we can change it. But we're required to do something and say something. You could say do not submit it until, and you put in a particular date, or don't ever put it in. Right? And then they sign it, and you sign it, and all that other stuff. How are we doing? What other forms do we want to? Let's see if there's anything here that Romeo put in that I found. I'm not going to go through all the advisories. Oh, let's do that one. I have to admit, the next thing is something I really hate. But it's called the additional signatures addendum. We're going to do one more thing, then I'll give you your 15-minute break. So, I have way too many things in here. If you have trouble finding stuff like I am, you start typing it in here, and maybe I don't have one. Oh, goody. So let's show how do you add a document. How about clicking on the button that says add a document? We're going to say add a form, and the form we're going to add is additional signatures addendum. And what an additional signatures addendum is, all right, here we go. Yeah, question.
I know that you, seller instruction to exclude listing from internet. So do we do the same thing as the MLS? Because in the back there's seller instruction to exclude listing from internet.
That's a different form. Now, that form I did not go over because I didn't feel like it. And what that form is, this is for the seller who says, I don't want my house on Zillow.
Okay, so
Right.
so it doesn't really matter at that point that you exclude it, even if it's excluded from MLS. MLS doesn't care about this.
Right.
Okay.
I've never had anybody list their home and tell me they don't want it on the internet. Usually they want to hear where is it going to be on the internet. Not, I don't want the internet to see my house is for sale. I don't know, but it's there in case. I'm not going to go through all of those, but additional signatures addendum can be a little tricky, so I thought I would cover that. Let's say there are 3 sellers. Husband, wife, and child. 3 sellers. There's only 2 places to sign and only any of these forms. You would need to do an additional signatures addendum. I really find it annoying when it's 3 buyers, because there's way more things to addendum than 3 sellers. So what you would do is you would say the residential listing agreement between, and notice how it doesn't automatically fill everything out. This is one of the annoying parts of the additional signatures addendum. Many of the forms, it's really good at figuring out who goes where, but this one is kind of murky. So what you would do is you would put in, let's say, between, and this would be the name of seller, right? And you would click in, or you could either say, and you would click seller, and you would put in names of the 3 buyers, right? And you would say these are all buyers. Is everybody with me so far? Right. Then, down below, the only person who really needs to sign this is the 3rd wheel. So I go through it, usually the mother and father sign and the kid is the 3rd one. Right? That's been my experience.
I'm confused. I thought we were talking about
3 sellers. 3 sellers.
Okay, so you put the 3rd seller.
I'm sorry. I was seeing if you're paying attention. How about that? So right now we don't need to do, I usually am doing this for a purchase agreement. So I was on automatic right there. Thank you for bringing me back to reality.
Okay.
How about that? Now we go. There we go.
Why 3 buyers?
Well, let's say Joe Smith, Mary Smith, and Wilbur Smith are the names of the 3 buyers. The father, the mother, the child. I just write them all in.
Could be an investment property where there are 3 buyers.
Sometimes there's a sheet. Right. So yes, and you can have several of them, but let's say we only have one extra buyer, one extra seller. I have to focus on this. One extra seller. So we would click seller here rather than buyer. I was just messing with you, and we would print name of seller. That would be the 3rd seller. There we go. And that would be the 3rd seller, and if applicable by, that would mean if somebody was signing for them, like a power of attorney or something like that. So right here is where you drop in the signature block. So the 3rd seller puts in their name and signs here and dates it. Right? You do not need anybody else to sign this form. Right? You do not need everybody else. Sometimes I've had agents say to me that everybody's supposed to sign the form. All the sellers have to sign the form, and eventually all the buyers. Nah, that's not what it says. The 3rd person signs the form, saying, I'm the 3rd person in this contract. The seller. Right?
So the buyer and seller, this form is okay for both.
Right. This is the same form for buyers and sellers. The additional signatures addendum is used for both groups. That's why I was a little confused, because 90% of the time I'm doing this, we're working with a buyer that has 3 buyers.
What if there's multiple buyers or investors that way you
have to use this form.
Doesn't matter how many people.
Well, first of all, if it's a big enough group, they'll form an LLC, right? Get their act together. And then we only got one person signing it under the representative capacity addendum. but I've had 4 or 5 people and added them all in this form. You can have multiple copies of the additional signatures addendum. Theoretically, you could have 100 people, right? We just keep making form after form after form after form and attaching them all. You can number them.
Okay, I'm confused. The name of this, okay, you say between the buyers, right?
Well, right now, we just say between the sellers, because this is a listing agreement. The form is designed to be used for both buyers and sellers, which is why it's got language that would be used for buyers. We just need to ignore that. All we're doing is adding one signature to the listing agreement. That's all we're doing, yes.
Once they've signed this document, does that mean that I have to print out the entire disclosures again, have them sign every page too, right?
Well,
It's not like a catch-all, like
yeah.
buyer, seller, A and B sign all the disclosures, and you found out there's a C there,
Yeah.
and then they sign this document, but they still have to sign all the
That is an excellent question, and I've been asked that many times. Theoretically, you sort of agreed to everything. However, other agents and transaction coordinators aren't going to like it. So what I usually do is have them drop in an additional initial and signature block just someplace on the form. Right, now let's talk about a practical thing. Let's say, was that good enough for this one?
No, I'm still confused.
What are you confused about?
Because you say now, first you say the buyers. Then
I made a
you say
mistake when I said
the
buyers because
sellers.
I was on the offer mode.
All right, so this is a listing agreement.
The listing
right?
agreement, we add one seller.
So, but you say between, so you put.
So
the
let's
name-
say there's 3 sellers.
Okay.
I say in that form, Mary Smith, John Smith, and let's say the child is Wilbur.
Okay, name of sellers. Then.
But then below that, I said name of 3 sellers. I originally said buyers, but I changed it.
Okay.
Name of the 3 sellers, I list all 3 of their names. And then below it, I put in the name of Wilbur Smith as the additional signature.
Right.
And what that does is that, and by the way, the listing agreement, the offer agreement allows me to put in the 3rd buyer. And it stacks them all up at the top.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Right. And so, but then there isn't 3 places to sign.
Right.
So like on the offer, that's why this is used. On the listing agreement, you just put in the names of the other sellers. You include that person's name, have them sign below that they're agreeing to that listing agreement, and you're off and running.
Okay.
All right, was that better? No, I get that a lot. That's okay. So let's say we wanted to sign something. I want to cover that. Just because I feel like it. All right. So assuming you created the parties right, and what that means is in the transaction you have a place where you can click on parties. All right, let me go back just so you can see. Up here, by the way, you ought to take some of the CAR classes on how to use zip forms. I'm just saying it would help. But notice over here it says parties. If I click on that, what I want to make sure is that I have all of the sellers' names and their email address. Right, that's what I want to make sure I have. And the reason I want to make sure I've got that is, let's say an addendum comes up and I need them to sign something. Let's say I want them to sign the statewide buyer and seller advisory. I want them to sign it. Now, CAR has a signing program called Digital Ink. And Digital Ink is really, really, really good at knowing where to put in signature and initial blocks on the commonly used standard CAR forms. They get a little weird when you get to probates and some weird things, and they don't seem to know where the form what fits. But for a purchase agreement, a listing agreement, and all the standard forms, it's dead on accurate. It puts everybody's name in the right spot. So if I've done that and I click on this e-sign button up here, it will launch Digital Ink and allow me to electronically sign it through the California Association of Realtors. No extra fee required.
It will take you automatically to DocuSign.
You also can, if you're paying a DocuSign subscription, it will take you to DocuSign. Now, the question is why. I just told my assistant this morning we're canceling our DocuSign account.
Okay.
And that's because we have SkySlope. And SkySlope has digital ink, or DigiSign. And DigiSign works a lot like DocuSign. Right? And so there's two types of things you're going to need to sign. One are forms that are coming right out of CAR. I always use digital ink or DocuSign because it comes right out and I don't have to do anything with it. The other is other documents, usually in a PDF format, that you need somebody to sign. You have to drop the signature blocks or have a transaction coordinator do it in the initial blocks in it. DigiSign in SkySlope works exactly the same as DocuSign. I just didn't want to pay $240 again for something that I already have two programs that is doing.
So hold on. So the SkySlope. So the reason I have DocuSign is because it's when you prepare your contract and everything on CAR, right? It will automatically populate all the signature things.
Right.
So I just to save me time in doing that, because it's still a lot of work. So SkySlope does that too?
Right, but it doesn't do it right out of the form. Notice I've gone here, I have a DocuSign account too. So I clicked on the e-sign. Notice one of the choices is ZipLogic.
Right.
That's built in.
Right.
Okay.
And it'll send an email and let them sign it.
Right.
And it'll come back to me.
Okay.
And I don't have to pay for DocuSign.
Right.
So, and it's really good, DocuSign is really good too, but it's really good at CAR forms coming out of Zip Forms because it's owned by CAR and Zip Forms.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, if somebody gives me sends a street tree disclosure,
Those
right,
are
that kind of
like
weird thing, and
the
my sellers have to
disclosures,
sign it or fill it out. DigiSign, which is in SkySlope, works just like DocuSign.
Yeah.
Looks a lot the same, works just the same. Why pay $240 a year when you already get it?
Yeah.
Right, and so I use digital ink from the forms in the system, and then I'll use DigiSign for the miscellaneous stuff on the side.
So car forms is basically an online zip forms, right?
Zip Forms is car forms. Zip Forms, ZipLogic is a third-party provider. They do this all across the United States.
Right.
They make deals with different associations to do their forms.
Yeah, I use ZipLogic. It totally populates where the names go and the dates. Settings.
How much does it cost?
It's included, ZipLogic is included in your CAR membership.
Exactly.
I don't say it's free, because CAR is not free.
Part of the
It's part of your union dues.
Exactly.
Right. All right, was that good enough for you guys? Did you have fun? Were there any questions that you wanted to have answered about listing agreements that I missed? I can't believe it, but if there was, this is your last chance. Counting down. All right, cool, you've been wonderful. Tell your friends.